Happy Devils Wednesday. This is State of the Fan Address, presented by pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Nick Villano, the editor-in-chief of one of the greatest Devils fan websites on the internet. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Yeah, baby. Coming to you live from the Primetime Radio Studios in North and South Jersey, as Nick and I will still debate the Taylor ham and pork roll thing like we do on Twitter. What's up, Nick?
Oh, I'm doing great. You know, we're killing it. You know, we're running around. I got my dad shirt on. I'm feeling very daddish. The baby yelled at me for about a half hour before coming on the podcast. I had to fix the sink that broke right before coming on the podcast. Man, I got dad chores, but you know what? I'm at my escape. I am exactly where I want to be. I'm ready to talk to Shayna Goldman about New Jersey Devils hockey and where we stand. Are we, I think that's been the prevailing talk, right? There's two things that happened this week, Sam. Two things. A, we talked about the Carolina Hurricanes way too much. Eric Holla, did you talk about this yet?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, I'm not going to make a bigger deal of it way it is. I mean,
the Hurricanes fans are pissed because Holla wore a Canes suck bracelet. Like, I don't know what happened. Do you know? Do you have any idea what happened? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what happened. I tried to do some research on it.
I think it was Eric Holla's wife. I'm just from what I understand, I could be wrong, but I think it was Eric Holla's wife. You know, when they were down, when they were with the Carolina Hurricanes, she may have said something saying that I hate it here in Raleigh, and obviously the Caniacs took it very personally, but they just didn't have a good time in Raleigh. Because, you know, what Raleigh, North Carolina is really, let's just say, the people that left Jersey settled there. That couldn't make it up here, you know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's the thing is that, I've had a lot of jobs in my life, Sam. Yep. I've almost always had more than one job at one time. I've almost never had just one job. And there's something you just don't like. And in hockey, I mean, hockey's different because, at the end of the day, you're playing a game, making millions of dollars no matter where you are. But, if you're somebody like Holla who, he's had trouble finding the right culture, right? He's always had trouble sticking. He's always a piece, getting traded, getting not re-signed, finding new teams. People always give him money. He's always made between $2 and $4 million everywhere he went, but it never stuck. He comes to New Jersey and bang, just fits like a glove. And Sam, I don't even want to hear the name Pavel Zacha ever again. So, he's killing it. He's doing so well. I think that. And then you have the Canes fans who are so mad at the Devils. I've seen such vitriol out of this fan base, Sam. Just mean tweets. I'm not going to get into the ones that are saying racist and homophobic and sexist stuff about Devils fans. That's not even worth mentioning. But there's a lot of vitriol out there, and it doesn't really make sense. It's a bracelet, guys. It's funny. It is what it is. If Artemi Panarin wore a Devils suck bracelet, I'd probably say something on Twitter because that's the brand, right? That's just how Twitter works and how my blog works and kind of that. But do we really care? This is a millionaire wearing a bracelet at a golf event, or maybe it wasn't even an event. Maybe it was just playing golf. This is some weirdo stuff.
If you have time to actually complain about this and let's just say be emotionally invested in this whole thing with being a Canes fan and what Holla's wearing on a bracelet, I think you've got a little too much time on your hands, to be honest. That's what I think. That's what I think. It's you make your comments, all that kind of good stuff, Nick, but, I'll be honest. I don't know what's maybe it's the off season. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
When you have the off season, there's not much news going on, so fans get restless. I get restless. You get restless. The Caniacs get restless, and they need an enemy. They need something to talk about, and they just happen to be out there now. Did Eric Holla do it on purpose to troll the Caniacs? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. But,
I'm not. I just don't care. I don't care about the Hurricanes.
Oh, I don't care, but I do care about our next guest.
Oh,
because she's a fan favorite. She's in the Travis Green room right now. Her name is Shayna Goldman.
I like the Andy Green room. Why you demote Andy Green?
Because we have Travis Green right now.
Okay.
All right, well, the Travis and Andy Green room right now. Her name is Shayna Goldman of The Athletic. You can find her on Twitter at Hey Shay. Shayna, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, and thanks for working with me to push this a week.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We were so happy to have you on. You're one of the better minds out there, and it's been a very exciting offseason, a very exciting year for New Jersey Devils hockey. But before we get into that, I'm just curious, have you seen this weird Devils Hurricanes rivalry that's building on Twitter this week? What are your thoughts on that as a non-partial observer?
Okay, so I do think that the Devils and the Canes could be an interesting rivalry for regular reasons, right? Of course, these are two teams that met in the playoffs. They're two teams that are likely going to be neck and neck in the division for some time for all the right reasons. But a slash of petty from a friendship bracelet, I think it's great. I think Eric Howell is in his he's in his villain era. I think he's been that way for some time, and now it's we're all just admitting it. And I say embrace it. Why not? He hates the Canes. This is nothing surprising. So let's just embrace it. Let him have his moment. He's on a team called the Devils. He needs to be a villain. It really has come to fruition.
He's just in his Taylor Swift reputation era. This is what this is, right?
I'm going to believe you on that. I, honest to God, could not say for myself. I just know a little bit about the fashion if you're in your reputation era, if you're going to the tour. Thanks to researching it for Allison Lucan. But for me personally, I don't listen to her. I don't know enough.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's fine. It was a lot of yelling at Kanye and Kim Kardashian, but that's basically the gist of it.
I remember this stuff. Okay.
Yeah, it was a wild time. It was a wild time. But so let's get into Devils hockey because we're getting to semantics and wildness. A lot of exciting stuff has happened. The Devils have had just they basically avoided a terrible offseason. With Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt signing their contracts, both for max term. Let's start with that because that could have been the disaster if you lost one or, God forbid, both of them. But he signed them for big money. Could be an issue later. Let me ask you this. Do you think that Fitz made the right decision going full term on these two very large average deals, knowing it eventually leads to some cap issues down the road?
Yes, because if you are building a team in today's NHL, you need to invest in your high-end players, and then you fill out your roster with replaceable, forwards and defensemen. You go for the low paying type to supplement the high end forwards. And the thing with it is really, the Meyer deal could have come in at a lot more money. He's worth more than that. And the Bratt deal, they're lucky didn't get raised too much when he took that 1 year contract instead of going for term last year. They're both very cost effective deals. They both look like they're going to age well, even in those later years. And maybe you'll have a problem at the very, very, very tail end of it. But that's something with cap growth that we should all anticipate for a ton of reasons, unless the NHL totally screws something up. It should be fine, right? These are the contracts. If you're going to make that leap and you're going to make a bet on any player, you do it on your top end players. And you have two of them right there. You have an outstanding playmaker in Bratt. You have the shot volume finishing talent in Meyer that this team has been missing. So, of course, those are the players you invest in. And when you look at the way that they've structured their contracts, the very, very, very top end, they're giving those contracts to. And the rest of them are replaceable. Damon Severson, replaceable. Ryan Graves to them, replaceable. John Marino comes in because it's cost controlled for years to come. They knew how to handle this, how to balance this situation. Even in net, it's super cheap. And yes, they might be in talks for other goalies, but I have to imagine they find a way to balance that out too. It seems like that's something they really have down pat. So I wouldn't be worried about that. It's hot Tom Summer. Let's just enjoy it.
I love that. They obviously, this is a bad team for a long time. And not only did they finally get over the hump, a lot of Devils fans would have been happy with a wild card berth, but they were the third best team in the NHL. Are you seeing is this a sustainable model is this is this a contender? Is this Colorado? Is this Tampa? Is this like something that we're going to see for a long time?
Colorado, the bar is very high. So I have a hard time placing anybody in that tier, honestly. Tampa Bay, what they were able to do for so many years, these are the later years of that contention era, but they had it for some time. That's also tough to measure up to, but I think the Devils could be on pace for that, absolutely. They surprised teams last year. They had a lot of teams on their heels by their playing style, and even when teams adapted to them, it did take them a little bit of time, but they figured out a way to push back. It seems like they're so in touch with what their identity is. It's this rush-based team that kills you with their speed and skill, and they're not bucking at it because it didn't work in the playoffs against the Canes. The best forechecking team in the league. The fact that they are able to lean into their strengths a little bit more and address their weaknesses by finding a player like Tyler Toffoli, getting that finishing talent, and trying to balance out the roster with the cheap contracts, it feels like they're on a very, very, very good path that I would say if they keep up at this pace and they don't get worried when something goes wrong. They know how to just keep replenishing, moving forward, and building instead of rebuilding, stepping back, scrapping what they've done and changing their playoff style, anything like that. To just build on what they've accomplished, I think is putting them on a path to be a very good contender for years to come. Yes, they're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's a great thing because you are always going to whine about players everybody's going to whine about players in the later years of the era, right? We look at Tampa Bay now. What are you doing to sustain it? If you can get ahead of the ball and get that extra year in that the Devils just did, it puts you on a better path long term that those later years, hopefully you have more accomplished by then. Hopefully their window is wider because they have this early momentum that we didn't expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with just about everything you said. I did put lofty goals out there with Colorado and Tampa, but there's always the worry is Vancouver, right? Vancouver was a budding superstar team, but I think it was 2 years ago where they made the run. Was it the Western Conference Finals? I guess not. When you're paying Tyler Myers $6 million.
Listen, they have some really good star and, high-end players. Demko's a very good player, but it was Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. And for me, I think the foundation wasn't strong enough to start doing what they did, and it fell apart so soon. I think that's the thing with it. A playoff berth like that can kind of trick you into thinking you're somewhere you're not, and it did for Vancouver. It did for Chicago, right? After they made that wild card, race that they shouldn't have done with the expanded playoffs. It's something that can be so dicey. The Devils didn't look at what they did and went, we're going to trick ourselves into thinking we're something else. They went, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to lean into it further. So I would separate them from that. I think it's an insult to put them with Vancouver. I think it's an insult to most teams to put them with Vancouver right now.
Yeah. No, listen, I am a pessimist at heart. So I look at the worst case scenario and go from there. And the worst case scenario to me is Vancouver, because now Vancouver is in a place where, I imagine Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes 3 or 4 years from now of not making the playoffs again, and you're in the middle of these contracts. So that's my worry. But as you say, that's not what they did. They didn't go out and sign a bunch of $5 and $6 million guys who should be making $3 million. I think that's kind of how you hurt the model. Another way you hurt the model is what I call my Corey Schneider fear, which is you pay the goalie for what he's done, and he gets paid till he's well after 30. And we saw it with Schneider. Schneider was the best goalie in the league. I will put my money on it. For 2 years, he was the best goalie in the league on the worst team. And he, took us out of the Connor McDavid sweepstakes by himself. He did a lot of things because he was Vezina level for those 2 years. And then he got paid. It wasn't crazy, $6 million a year, but still, that contract is still on the books right now because you had to buy it out, and now you're talking about getting a Connor Hellebuyck or getting a John Gibson or getting a couple other guys who I'm not off the top of my head I know how much Saros is, but or how old Saros is, but I'm assuming he's closer to 30 than he is. So you're talking about these goalies who are closer to 30, but it opens your window a little bit more right now. So you could win this Stanley Cup right now. Basically, what I'm saying, I'm providing you with all of my anxiety, Shayna, and I need you to help me out. What should the Devils do in net?
Okay. The Devils have built their team that they don't need elite goaltending, in my opinion. I don't think they need a Connor Hellebuyck. I don't think they need a John Gibson. Now, a John Gibson intrigues me a little bit more because I wonder how much he can bounce back. I wonder if the cost is a little bit different and you have that certainty, right? You have, when he signed that contract, it was one of the best goalie contracts around. He's an incredible goalie. Everything fell apart around him. I have a little bit more faith than others do in what he can still do at this time. I am not as concerned if they were to go after John Gibson. I think that could be the right move if you're comparing Gibson to Hellebuyck, which might sound like a hot take because Connor Hellebuck's been one of the best goalies in the league forever. But I think the thing with it is a goalie, I think the contract will start when he's age 31, and it just doesn't work out. You look at the exceptions, they're few and far between. Henrik Lundqvist to me is the goalie who got that contract when he was in his 30s and it worked out, right? It really did. He was playing at such a top level even though his team was absolute garbage around him. They tried the same thing with Carey Price, and there was a big gap in talent between Price and Hank, in my opinion, and a gap in certainty of who would provide positive value for you over the life of that contract, but I think they were betting that he would replicate it, and he didn't. You look at the Sergei Bobrovsky contract, and he's a very, very, very good goalie in his, prime. You don't sign that contract. So for Hellebuyck, I can see why a team will hand him that contract. And I think certain teams are built for a goalie to have that kind of contract. The New York Rangers are a team that are built to have an elite goaltender back them up. The Colorado Avalanche aren't. They're a team that can get away with average goaltending because they're so stacked in front. You need to have at least 2 of 3 elements. If you can get all 3, that is a luxury, but I think that you can get by without it. If you're a team like the Devils that does such a good job protecting the net, you need average goaltending. Is Vanacek that? That's a good question to ask. We have a lot of questions about Vanacek, and rightfully so. And this year answered some and then posed more, so it's a tough one to go with. For me, though, I just think going for a player like Connor Hellebuyck is a little redundant, that you're going to have to cut elsewhere and it's going to hurt the team and the strategy that they've built up. It'll eventually balance themselves out, but that's the contract I would worry about in the later years versus the Bratton Myers. John Gibson, because you have that end date in sight, it's a little bit nearer in the term. I would be okay with that if I were a Devils fan. If I were, in the Devils organization, I would be pushing for that, depending on the cost of acquisition, which who knows what that's going to be. We don't have a lot of bars for understanding what a goalie trade should look like. But for me, I keep thinking of someone like a Logan Thompson. That's the goaltender I would be targeting if I were the Devils.
I love that name. I think Logan Thompson is and Vegas is kind of in a weird spot, right? They got Leonard, they just paid Aiden Hill. I assume after paying Aiden Hill, they think that Leonard is done, but they're kind of in a weird spot, and I think Logan Thompson's a great goalie.
Yeah.
So
he's
I
high end 1B, right? And that's what this team could look for, especially if they want to give Schmidt a little bit more time to cook. Why not? Mm-hmm. If you have that luxury, why not do it? You give yourself a safety net behind, Vanacek, which I would say they kind of need. That's the thing. The thing with Vanacek this year is you saw him play at such a high level and give that consistency until the end of the year, and you have to wonder if it's acclimating to his workload. Someone like Jake Ottinger struggled with that just last year as well at the end of the year. Did he struggle with the workload? Did he struggle with it in the postseason? Goalies take time to adjust to that. So it's not unrealistic to think Vanacek might just need that, and then this year through the spring he'll be fine. And if you manage his minutes down the stretch, it'll be totally okay. But do you want to bank on that when you really should be capitalizing on these peak years of players? I'm not sure. I think you just need a little bit more certainty alongside him.
And you watched that Rangers Devils series pretty closely. Did you see something in Schmid that was like, oh, we were just sleeping on this guy, or was this? We've seen these postseason performances that come out of nowhere and just dazzle everybody, and then they can't. Binghamton is like the biggest example of that, where he went nuts for 5 months and then is not really a good goalie for the rest of his career. Is there a way to like tell who's Cam Ward, who came out of nowhere and sustained it for the rest of his career, and who's Binghamton, who didn't?
There's no way to understand goaltending. I'm sorry, unless you're an actual
That's
goalie.
fair.
Like, sometimes it's just vibes. I like to have 200 games, right, of a sample, and I feel like we kind of know what a goalie is by then. And we don't have that for Schmid. And I'm not someone who's been tracking minor leagues or anything like that either. I'm the first to admit prospects aren't my specialty. For me, it's watching him at the NHL level. Even the year the Devils had a million goalies and everything fell apart, he was the one that I think kind of instilled a little bit more hope. And I think that last year he did the same thing. Like when he went to take over in that series, it was like if you watched the Devils play the last year and a half, you knew he was a good goaltender. You knew there was this calmness, this stability to his game, this ability to, play against tips and deflections. All of that was true. But to expect him to be the playoff starter, that is such a hit or miss thing right there. How many goalies can jump into that position? Someone like Braden Holtby, maybe. He jumped into the position and, jumped out as a playoff starter. But not everybody can do that. And I wouldn't put the series on him per se against the Canes either. It was a team effort. He didn't have goal support. If he had goal support, maybe everything's a little bit different. So that way, it's a little bit tricky right now. I think if they want to give him more time, because generally speaking, what we know of goaltending, and it is so little compared to the other positions, it's that most people think goalies need a little bit more time to cook in the minors before they're ready. Some can buck that trend. UC Saros is a prime example of that. I believe he was a backup goalie at age 21 and was essentially a 1B by the time he was 22. We don't often see that at 25 or 26. So it's a little bit, tricky there. But I think, if they want to stay the course with him and try to work on these next couple years and then the throne is his essentially once he's ready, why not?
And real quick before, I know we're coming up on time, but I do want to know your thoughts. You brought up Toffoli a little bit earlier. That was the big move this season, right? That was the acquisition. They haven't really done much in free agency. They made a couple small signings in the Colin Miller trade. But what is your thoughts on Toffoli? Where does he fit in this offense? What are the main benefits of that trade?
Yeah, the fact that they were so proactive ahead of free agency was the biggest one of all, because in free agency, you're only going to acquire so much talent. Top end players tend not to make it there. If they do, you're signing them for too long and too much money. But for Toffoli, you're getting a year at minimum of him at this price, and you can figure it out from there. He brings finishing talent, and that is exactly what this team needs. He is very versatile. He can play anywhere in your lineup, anywhere in the top nine. And I think that's the threat for the Devils, is that they have so many options to mix and match that top line. If something goes stale, they have so many backup options. And hopefully in the regular season, we see them test out a couple of them, that if things, get dicey in the playoffs, that they know in their back pocket these combinations work. But he's a goal scorer. At his best, he is a shot generator, a scoring chance generator, and a goal scorer. And that is everything the Devils need, right? The Devils are one of the best playmaking teams in the league. But if you can put it together and have someone with finishing talent, that's what they were missing, right? Everything, if they could have gotten a couple saves and they could have cashed in on a couple of their chances, that's how everything we've been saying the last 2 years. And now to bring in someone who specifically can fit that bill to help give them the goal support a little bit more consistently and a little more versatility in the top nine, I think that's like a slam dunk win. And, at his best, we look at his best season, look back to Montreal, right before he was traded. He was at his best with the playmaker. The Devils have a ton of them. That is their best strength, is that they have so many playmakers. Put him with each year, he'll thrive. Put him with Jack Hughes, he can thrive. Put him with Brett, he could thrive. So there's so many options that they just open themselves up to have. I think, between someone like Palat, who I would say honestly underwhelmed in the regular season, but thrived in the postseason, like, you can slot him appropriately on the depth chart because you have someone like Toffoli to step in. It's just an all-around win for the Devils. And the fact that they were able to acquire him for a player they were actually looking to trade instead of having to spend elsewhere and do multiple transactions, just a, total slam dunk win for them.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. That's the main point, is that I think Toffoli is such a perfect addition. And I honestly, you kind of got my thoughts going. I need to go back and look at some of that tape from Montreal, because I've been looking at a lot of the Calgary tape and looking at his 34 goals this year, just kind of seeing how they came, and a lot of them he would be in better positions if he was on the Devils. So thinking about what he can do more, but yeah, I'm going to go back now that you mentioned that and look at kind of that Montreal tape and kind of see what went right there. But I really appreciate you coming on. I want to give you a couple minutes, just kind of promote everything you're doing. You're doing the Too Many Men podcast. You're doing everything you're doing with The Athletic, with Dom, by yourself. You're kind of, I still consider you the Devils beat writer, even though, that's not a thing, I know, but I'm holding you for our own just a little bit. I know we got a little bit of your focus. So, but promote everything you're doing right now and let everybody know where they can find your work.
Yeah, I am with, two brilliant people, and Allison Lucan and Sarah Sivian on the Too Many Men podcast. You can listen to us talk about everything and anything relating to hockey and Taylor Swift, apparently, because that's what we do all the time. And writing-wise, you can find everything at The Athletic. We're going to have a lot of projects. I have some things coming up about entry-level contracts and their importance to, Stanley Cup contenders that I'm, working on, things the NHL can learn from other leagues. Trying to have some fun with like off-season content, but later this summer and early September, things like previews and player tiers and fantasy projections. So all of that will be there.
Love that. We'll definitely tweet that out whenever you got a little Devils bias in those pieces. We're gonna move those, and we're finally like out of our entry level contract era. The only one we really have left is Dawson Mercer, and then maybe Alexander Holtz. So. That's a little scary. I hope that
more of them. Got to get the Luke Hughes and all those entry level deals up there soon.
Yeah, some of Nemitz. Okay. See, it's just an embarrassment of riches. So I guess we're still in good shape. But Shayna, I really appreciate you spending some time with us. We'll have you on again soon. We're really excited for the season start and seeing everything you're going to do at The Athletic up until then.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Shayna. That is Shayna Goldman of The Athletic. You can find her on Twitter at HeyShay, HAYYY, SHAYYY.
I think the miracle of the podcast is that I survived.
I know.
Like, listen, I'm not trying to go too far. Like, it is, the entire time I was like, I dropped. No, I'm still here. I dropped. No, I'm still here. And like, I
don't know what happened, Nick. For the listeners that don't know, before the podcast, technical difficulties. Nick's internet feed was dropping, and I was getting nervous. But as soon as Shayna comes on, it seemed like the internet started to work because I was watching. I was watching the entire time. I was like, "Wow, perfect timing." Maybe the internet loves Shayna.
They have this dynamic there with her and Dom Luszczyszyn, like just insane work that they do all the time. When they work apart, they do great work. When they work together, it's even better. I know there's been some flack towards The Athletic, but like they still have so many incredible writers, and Shayna is one of the top. She brings something that like this is what I try to do as a writer, Sam. Knowing that there's so much competition, even in just the Devil spaces, I try to stand out. And I know I can't stand out with analytics. I know I can't stand out with, straight up analysis. So I try to stand out with personality and creativity, right? But Shayna can do that along with the analytics and kind of make it make sense. And like, even if you go to her pinned tweet, I was looking at like kind of like some of her recent work through her Twitter, and her pinned tweet is just like a breakdown of like analytics. And like that's such a great pin tweet. So go to HeyShay, HAYYY, on Twitter, and she'll break down analytics for you.
It's
at 3 Ys
at HAYYY SHAYYY on Twitter.
Yeah.
Hey Shay.
So yeah, no, she does such an incredible job. I love she's everywhere, Sam. The fact that she makes time for all these podcasts, all these radio shows. She's on the Jeff Merrick show. I know that's on hiatus. I went through her Twitter account.
She has a nice microphone. Yeah.
She's a great background. I saw Slowpoke back there. The Slowpoke.
Speaking of backgrounds, okay. Speaking of backgrounds, I was going to talk to you off air about it, but since you brought it up, we need to look at Shayna's background. We need to have better backgrounds ourselves. Mine's a little busy.
Here's the thing, Sam, and you talked about coming here. I think now that the Wired situation is just in the poopy doopy. I think we just need to build the podcast studio because where the internet is right now is in the middle of my living room. So obviously, no wife or husband in the world is going to allow their spouse to build a podcast room in the middle of the living room. So I've come
Mrs.
to
Wu
an agreement
allows
with
it. I don't know what's going on in your household. Mrs. Wu allows everything.
That is not your living room. That is your basement. I know where you are, Sam Wu. Get out of here.
You know,
I am on.
Actually,
I am about.
Truth be told, this podcast was actually started from Mrs. Wu's couch.
And guess
years
where you are
ago. Now I'm down in the basement.
You
in
are
the
no
bunker.
longer on the couch because that had an expiration date in it, my friend.
Yeah, matter of fact, we threw that couch. I think in 2020.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Listen, we had a couch cast once. We did a hotel couch cast once. So we, you make it work. You make it work. But here,
sorry to interrupt, but we got a burning question from Denny on the Facebook Live. There was a signing today.
Yeah. I have thoughts.
out of Boston, I believe.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? I know Beer Baron's thoughts, but what are your thoughts?
Tell me Beer Baron's thoughts, because I
don't want to reveal. I don't want to reveal group text, but I think it was either Scotty says, let's see. Let me read verbatim. Scotty. In fact, one could argue Nosek's value has reached the highest point of his career. A 6'3" undrafted Czech center, Nosek spent last season as the Boston Bruins' main fourth-line center. He occupied that role as the Bruins went on to a historically successful regular season run, and his defensive abilities played a part in their success. He won nearly 60% of his 597 faceoffs this past season, showcasing some value at the faceoff dot. I think Scotty probably cut and paste this. Nosek played the second most minutes of any forward on Boston's penalty kill, a unit that was the league's best, killing penalties at 87.3% success rate. Wonder what this might be for. What current Devils player do these stats sound like?
Are you talking about McLeod?
Yeah. I think that's what he's referring to.
Here's the thing, Sam.
What's that? Depth. Beefalytics.
I mean, there's a very scary report. Not scary. That's not the right word. There's a disturbing report that's about to come out.
I think so, and I think I'm
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do have to to save myself. The 2018 Hockey Canada report is about to come out. Michael McLeod was on that team. Right now, those are the only two connections, and that's all we can say. Is that we know he was on the team, and in that city on that night, we know that he was, partying or whatever. He was with people that night. That is all we know. But we do know that, and we don't know that he wasn't a part of it. Those are the two things we know. So I'm not saying that this is why you make that signing. But I'm saying listen, Bastian got 2 years and McLeod got 1. I have to think that after the playoffs that McLeod had, and after how much Lindy Ruff leaned on him last season, it is at least insurance. You have to insure your investment, right?
Yeah. You know what?
You can't. There is no other center that could play that role. None on this team that could win faceoffs, check, penalty kill. There's no other center that can Holla kind of does it, but he plays a completely different role.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's good to have insurance regardless of this incident, just from a player standpoint in terms of the team standpoint of having depth. I think Tom Fitzgerald has proven that he's proactive when it comes to these things. Now, we talked about this on the Will Report, but now is it the NHL doing the investigation right now? Is this what this report, or is this where is this report coming from?
I want to say, Did Hockey Canada do the report themselves?
I don't think anybody trusts what Hockey Canada has to say right now.
No, I understand.
I would have to
But if
assume that
it-
it's come from the NHL, or is it somebody that
I'd have to
the
double check.
NHL independently? Yeah, we should really, or
Let me
the
just look it up real
Canadian
quick,
police.
so I just want to make
Yeah.
sure I get this right.
Yeah, but here's my point. Nick. Whatever's going to happen, and we're not pointing fingers who's guilty, I think all teams are going to be bracing for impact on this one because this is going to be bad. I read up
It
on
is hockey. Wait. It is. I think it's Hockey Canada. Because Hockey Canada gave a third. Oh, so Hockey Canada hired a third party.
Okay.
So whatever you want to call that.
Okay.
But anyway, sorry. Continue.
Even that I don't even trust. I don't trust anything anymore. But that's just me. I don't know.
I mean, you're paying somebody to investigate yourself. That's weird.
Yeah, but I've seen it go sour. But,
Oh, absolutely. I've seen a lot of government institutions will pay somebody to investigate themselves, and surprise, surprise, they're doing a great job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so we've seen it a lot. And it's like Sam. It's like if you paid me, and you're like, "How am I doing as a podcast host?" I'd be like, "You're doing great." Instead of now, so now when you're not paying me, and I say you're doing great, like it really means something.
Yeah, and especially when it wasn't even addressed last season. You know, I think it was only Novozinski that actually asked something, and then McLeod shut it down. You know, I mean, so the elephants in the room.
He was
because of that
almost
reason.
never made available.
Yeah,
He was almost never made available.
yeah. You know, I mean, it kind of sucks, but you know what? At the same time, the optics don't look good, but doesn't automatically it make guilt either. You know.
Yeah.
So
You also listen, like Sam, to be fair, you know, I am a big proponent of
I thought you froze there for a second, but
sorry, I got a text kind of similar. It's partially about this, but I am a big proponent of innocent until proven guilty. I'm not hanging McLeod right now. I'm saying that, you know, it I don't know what it looks like. It looks like nothing, right? It looks like, I'm trying to use the right words. There is a possibility that it happened, and there's a possibility that it didn't happen, and that's it. That's all we have.
yeah.
So how do you go forward with that? Like, how do you, like, it is inherently a risk to have McLeod on your team.
Mhm.
It's inherently a risk to have McLeod signed long term. However you want to look at it. It's inherently a risk to rely on McLeod right now. Because I will go on record that if he's in this report and it's damning evidence and it's more than just he didn't tell on the boys, like if it's like he was involved, get him off the team. Straight up. Like, I am never.
But
I don't.
Here's the other argument, though. If he's in the report, wasn't that punter called the punt god in the report, and it turned out he wasn't even there?
That was not an investigative report. That was a.
I thought it was. Because
the punt guy was named in a police report.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
And like most people, you will probably have the same thoughts as most people. But a police report is literally what somebody said to a policeman, and he writes it down on a piece of paper.
Gotcha.
That is a police
Okay.
report.
All right.
So, and then they do the investigation beyond that. And during the investigation beyond that is where they drop the charges because there was conflicting evidence. There was, because the value of a police report is that they need every single possible detail quickly because things get fuzzy as time goes on, right? You misremember, you can't recall, especially in a traumatic event.
Yep.
But they also need to, they gather everything and they write it down and then they stick it in the file and they call it a day.
Now, was it fair that the Buffalo Bills cut him at that point? Should the Devils cut McLeod? When that's a police report?
I'm going to tell you this, you're in a different business. You're in a different business in hockey and football and acting and Hollywood and politics. Like, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. And that's just part of it. Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying, because right now the Devils have kept McLeod.
It's
But with the punt god, I don't know his name, but they cut him immediately, just
he
like
got
that.
named though. Like it's such a different situation. He
Is
got
it different?
physically named by the accuser.
Okay,
It was the
Gotcha.
accuser misremembered how the night went, is how I understand from that.
gotcha.
And there is physical evidence to say that what she said was incorrect. And
Gotcha.
whatever. Like, I don't want to get into semantics of that, but you are correct. Like, that is an existing thing. There is nothing connecting McLeod to this except for circumstantial evidence.
Gotcha.
And circumstantial evidence could connect you and me to anything in this world.
Like we
You know what I
happened to
mean?
be at the bar when something happened, and we were just there that night or something like that.
Yeah. So I don't, you have to give. That's not the right wording. This is such a hard topic. Like, I'm trying to be fair to all sides. And, like, we're getting into, like, this thing. Basically, like, all I wanted to say is that they signed this guy because McLeod is not a guarantee. He just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I will go on record that I think that's why they signed him to 1 year. And I think that makes sense. You have to, like, the report's coming out this summer. It is coming out in, a month from free agency or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Sign him to a year, and then if everything works out, you can sign him an extension in January if he wasn't involved. Great. I will root like hell for McLeod if he's not involved. It was, Sam, I'm going to tell you, and, like, not saying that I'm a victim of this at all, but it was hard to root for McLeod this year. Just because you don't know. You just don't know.
Well, he didn't
And, like,
address the elephant in the room. He took the advice of his attorneys that there's an ongoing investigation. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, which within his right, but at the same time, you don't address it. The optics don't look good. It doesn't look
and
good at
I
all.
do think that was bad advice from his lawyers, because what does he, like, if he's a terrible person and he did this, what does lying even matter?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I never understood that. And, like, you had to know the optics were going to look bad, especially when so many people are coming out and saying that they didn't do it. Like, it's definitely something. But the point is that, and like, don't get too caught up in, like, the one-way contract. The one-way contract just means that he's going to get paid the same in the NHL and the AHL. Like, he would have had to gone through waivers anyway. It doesn't really matter. So if they go through training camp and preseason and they decide, he's not even worth the extra, right? He's not even worth, I think he would be, but I'd say that's what they decide, that he's not worth the extra man. They'll put him through waivers and send him to Utica. And if somebody claims him, whatever. Like, it's not like they're not going to lose sleep over it, right?
Yep.
They did that with Sinishin last year. The former first-round pick of Boston. He signed to a PTO in the preseason and wasn't good enough to make the NHL team, but they wanted to keep the asset, so signed him to a whatever. Like, I don't know if it was a one. I'm assuming it was a two-way contract. That's the only difference. But a two-way contract doesn't allow you to go to the AHL. Like, that's not – the two-way contract just dictates what you get paid in the AHL. Yeah. Yes, a lot of two-way contracts means that, because Chris Tierney signed a two-way contract. Mm-hmm. So he will have a different salary if he's in Utica than if he's in New Jersey. It's really only a difference.
Big
so
question.
The one-way contract, it's just a little semantics.
Big question from R. Nunez, Sam Nick. Do you expect the report to be dumped late on a Friday to limit the news coverage?
Oh, probably. This is Hockey Canada. This is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, know what I'm going to be doing Friday night.
Listen, I just don't want to talk about it. Like, and I don't have to, I guess. Like, not like this. Like, it is something we should talk about.
Well, we're trying to be fair here, and I've mentioned this on the Woo Report several times. Just, I remember about 20 years ago, me playing high school lacrosse, having still the relationships and the Duke lacrosse case. I mean, I remember back then that it was big news. It was national headline news. I mean, and the case was ongoing. And I remember a good friend of mine who was very close to a lot of those players as a coach, in camp and all that, he said, Sammy, don't judge. The truth's going to come out because some of these kids were not even in the state at that time when this thing happened, and they're getting accused. And I've said this on the Woo Report as well, that I believe it was the captain of the team that was in New York for a job interview and had to submit his ATM receipt where there's cameras in Manhattan, where his alibi, where he was that night. And on top of that, he still, when he goes for job interviews, still has problems, even though he's exonerated. So you have to be very careful, because I know a lot of people I'm not going to name them right now, have extremely big mouth on Twitter that that just loves to accuse, blah, 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 that you're guilty because here is the behavior. Everyone's different. Who knows? Maybe Mikey McLeod is an introvert and he doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know. But you have to let the facts come out.
Can I tell you why this sucks, Sam?
What?
I mean, I keep saying the wrong things. That's the one. It is so hard to talk about because we are wrong on both sides right now. Do you know what? We are wrong on both sides because the one side says that it is not right to even bring him up in such a heinous crime without evidence tying him to it, which is a fair argument. The other side is saying there is circumstantial evidence connecting him to a heinous crime. You shouldn't even want to be associated with that, and that is something you should talk about, which is also fair. We tried to do, you're trying to appease both sides, and it's just not possible. But trying to appease both sides is probably what you should do as, a commentator, and that's what we are at the end of the day. It's like we come here to talk about hockey, but we try to talk about everything. We try to, but
it does affect something. It does, again, it's something that's not hockey related, but it is. And
it's going to be hockey related.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean,
whoever's on this report is no longer a hockey player. I can almost guarantee that.
Yeah. I've been in situations before where, unfortunately, even though you're innocent, sometimes you just have to keep your mouth shut. And he could be in one of those situations. And you know what? Time will tell but I think the hockey world deserves the facts right now. What did you find? What did you find? What did you not find? What are still the question marks? The
report says that there's players named, right? Isn't that what the reporting of the report? Didn't I see that?
Yeah.
That there's players named?
Yeah.
Didn't say if it was current, former prospects, but there are players named. And
yeah. I just hope, again, because I lived through the whole Penn State thing, all right? And the one thing I couldn't stand were the leaks before it came out. Yeah. I just wanted to come out.
Yeah. And the unfortunate thing is, the leaks were sometimes like a game of telephone. I remember that.
Yeah.
It was almost like, not that it was it was almost like misconstrued, right? Like somebody would tell somebody the facts and it'd be like, is it this? And then you kind of had to not read between the lines, but you kind of had to make your own analysis of it with very little information. And then the report would come out, and the report's 100,000 pages or whatever it was. It was some insane number of pages. And it's well, I'm not reading that. You know what I mean? So you had to go back of the old reporting, and you're right. It's not fair. That's, again, none of this is fair, to be honest. It's definitely not fair to the victim. No, first and foremost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not fair to the victim and having to relive it in the public eye. But at the same time, if there's anything that's good that's going to ever come of it, is I hope this crap stops. I hope that kind of culture, it's got to go. What's being said here. I'll tell you. You and I both went to college. Mm-hmm. You've heard of stories. I remember in college, when they, again, I know I'm not a statistics guy and all that, but when they talk about men and women, I think at the time it was 1 out of 3 women have been sexually assaulted. And I think men was 1 out of 7, and all that.
Yeah.
And then you go into these classes, and then all that stuff. It's just like, okay, we're 2023, and this is still happening. In 2018, still happening, and all I'm saying is, it's a lot of attention's on this, and we shall see what the facts are here.
Yeah. It is, without it, literally, like saying, like, I'm so uncomfortable right now because I just want a script to read. Like, I wish I wrote it out. I wish we knew we were talking about this, because I would have just wrote myself a script, because it is so easy as just a commentator to say the wrong thing, to hurt people. Like, the people who've been victimized of this, and like this randomly comes up on a podcast like this, and if you say the wrong thing, like, you can hurt people.
Yeah.
Like, and that's like the opposite. Like, we are a podcast of, happiness and fun times and laughter, but we're also, like, real. We will talk about what's going on, and we haven't really talked about this because there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
This signing a center like this tells me there's the speculation is at least warranted to be like, is this? And I don't think that they would even do this. I think knowing the report is coming out is enough for them to do this. Not that they have any inside info that McLeod is involved or he might get suspended or whatever. I think that, like, just being, like, realistic as a team and saying, we don't know. And this guy is available and he can help us out in that situation. Like, I just think that it's gotta be on your mind. It's gotta be.
Well, let's put it this way. Let's switch gears before we're up against the clock right now. Look at it this way. Forget about what's going on here. Tom Fitzgerald's adding some depth. I mean, you get a guy like him, right? Injuries do happen, okay? And last season, I thought the bottom 6 really carried the team in the playoffs, because the playoffs are brutal. And the Devils kind of got a little worn down there. It would have been nice to have a little depth where you can kind of insert a player into the lineup that's fresh, big, strong, and does all the little things right. And I think that's what really primarily, Tom Fitzgerald is doing here. I think he's kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Obviously, what we've been talking about in the last half an hour, but the other thing is to add the depth, going down the stretch where you make the moves now instead of paying the price with assets later down the stretch on trade deadline. You already have these assets already under 1-year contract. So I think that's a smart move, because I think the way Tom Fitzgerald is evaluating this team, his valuation is, this is a cup contender right now. You got your top 6. You've got decent goaltending. The Achilles heel right now is the defense, because you're losing Severson and you're losing Ryan Graves. That's some experience there, some decent size, with more finesse young kids. I think that's the one thing I'm a little worried about the growing pains, but I don't think it's going to affect the Devils' season overall, where they don't make the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. So,
hope so. I would think so, but it's crazier things have happened. But everybody we talk to, everybody talked to is pretty confident that this is a playoff team going forward.
Yeah.
But I'll say this too, and this is the last point I'll make: the Devils have no center depth before today.
Oh,
there's not really great centers, and they had Tierney that they just signed, but there's not really great centers coming up in Utica. Unlike at the wings, where you have Graham Clark and Nolan Foote and Alexander Holtz and Tice Thompson and a couple others that, Brian Hallinan and a couple other, like, depth pieces that you have. right?
Yep.
The wings are pretty stacked with talent up and down the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Center, you have the most premium top end talent. Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, one of the best duos in the league. You got Eric Holla, great third line center. You got Michael McLeod, despite everything we just said, great fourth line center. Wasn't fantastic in the playoffs. If one of them gets hurt, you're kind of, you got to put Mercer there, right? Like you can't, if before this signing today, you didn't really have a center that could jump into the lineup. So maybe that's all it is. Maybe we're pessimistic. Maybe we went down a rabbit hole that we didn't need to go down. But
it's not a.
You have to. I think you have to say.
We
what? Had to say.
Honestly, Nick, we're trying to be truthful here, and that's the topic on Twitter. This is not something that I just came up with some conspiracy theory, whatever. It's all over Twitter, and
it's common sense.
Yeah,
like it is common sense that when you see a center get signed who has that skill set, that is literally a mirrored copy of a player that Lindy Ruff really likes, on the ice, and you wonder what the reason is, and the reason is,
well, the other thing too, it's better
risk.
us that we signed Nosek than somebody else, another rival. So it's like addition by subtraction, or no, that's probably a bad example, but you sign a guy
subtraction by addition, actually.
Yeah, or whatever. I don't know. It's getting late. Nick, what are you plugging? We got to get out of here.
All right, pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm actually currently working on a very large article for the front page, 30 records that could break in the NFL season. That'll be up next week on fansided.com. But in the meantime, Pucks and Pitchforks, Steven just wrote a piece about the 3 contenders that might get in the way of the Devils on their way to a possible Stanley Cup final berth. One very surprising one. Really excited to share that one. That one's out there on pucksandpitchforks.com. I wrote a piece. I don't even, Sam, it's been a week. I don't even remember what. Pull up pucksandpitchforks.com and I'll tell you what's on.
Oh, jeez. This is the father life right now. Lack of sleep.
I got nothing.
Wow. Wow.
Right. 5 things we actually learned. I wrote that. Man, it's bad. We were talking about I wrote about how Nico's going to win the Selke. And I laid out the evidence. Sam, there's been, since 2010, there's been, 14 Selke trophies given out. There are, in that time, there have been 14 players that have finished in second place. 3 have never won a Selke trophy. One was Elias Lindholm, who I believe finished second last year. And another one was Mark Stone, who everybody and their mother would put money on that he's going to win a Selke as long as he stays healthy.
Gotcha.
And the only one who's not going to win one, who finished in second place, was David Backes. So lots more information in there about why Nico Hischier is going to win a Selke, whether he deserves it or not. I think he will deserve it, though. But it's just how the voters work. Nico Hischier is going to win a Selke.
Wow. Great. Well, I want to welcome Katie at Red Bull Royd in the YouTube Live. You know why, Nick? Because she is...
A wild name.
Yeah, she says, hello, guys. I subscribe to y'all's channel. I'm Katie, and I love hockey. New
Hi,
listener.
Katie.
New listener. We've got new listeners everywhere. Yeah. And you can find.
I didn't know we were still there. We still celebrate. We always celebrate new listeners, but we're getting there. Are we too big for our britches?
No, we can't because Mrs. Wu told me that these people are listening and watching you. If you don't recognize them, then you guys look like a bunch of jerks. No, I'm just kidding.
I gotta say, we've when we first started this, we were big on comments. We were big on that. We'll get back to that. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do a comment section only podcast. Keep those comments coming in. But you see, Sam, you always look at them, and if one catches your eye, you'll ask me. We'll talk about it.
Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm constantly watching the YouTube Live and Facebook Live. It's hard to do it on live air. But, well, All those that are listening, you know where we drop the podcast at midnight on our Apple Podcast page, Google Podcast page. Just search engine Let's Get L's podcast. Our downloads are still going so strong, even in the off season. Nick, I know pucksandpitchforks.com is doing very well this off season. Lots to talk about, and keep it here. This is where we talk puck. Devils hockey. Yes. And the Woo Report. Hello, Ramona. Yes, the Woo Report. Also known as the Morning Woo. I'm changing up the format, Nick. You'd be surprised what I'm doing with the Morning Woo for next season and the Woo Report. Keeping it short shifts. Keeping people thinking. Anyway. Alrighty. Getting out of here. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone. pucksandpitchforks.com. Till next time, let's go Devils.